And so we're in for a real treat, another treat this afternoon. And without further ado, let me introduce Attorney Bob Weisberg, a civil rights attorney, and he will introduce our authors. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to introduce Ben Greenman, and Ben is going to introduce our esteemed guests. Ben is the author of at least 10 books, including multiple critically acclaimed works of fiction, including Superbad, Please Step Back, What He's Poised to Do, and his most recent novel is called The Slippage. And Ben has worked at the New Yorker magazine as the editor of the Goings-On Town section for 14 years, from 2000 to 2014. And in 2014, Ben became a contributing writer for the New Yorker. In addition to writing for the New Yorker, Ben's articles have been published in numerous magazines, including Mother Jones, Rolling Stone, as well as others. Now, like a lot of novelists, Ben now lives in Brooklyn. However, Ben didn't always live in Brooklyn. Ben grew up in Miami, and Ben graduated from Miami Palmetto High School. And I was fortunate. I've known Ben for nearly 30 years. And I have to say, as a teenager, in talking with Ben, his insight into literature, music, as well as world events was astounding and really stood out to me, unlike any other teenager that I had ever interacted with. So it's no surprise to me, standing here today, that Ben would be here as a co-author of the memoirs of two musical giants, George Clinton's Brothers B, Yo Like George, Ain't That Funkin' Kinda Hard on You, and Questlove's Mo Better Blues, The World According to Questlove. And Ben will introduce the both of them. But I just want to share a couple of other thoughts about Ben. Aside from his obvious literary accomplishments, as evidenced by all of his published books and essays, and his work at the New Yorker, what's always impressed me most about Ben is his ability to write insightfully, satirically, and humorously about so many diverse areas of life. And I say to really appreciate Ben's special talents, special and unique talents, I suggest to you, whenever you have a few moments and you're sitting at the computer, is Google Ben Greenman and see where that takes you. And it will take you to a world of writing that's just incredibly creative, including essays, poems, and including what's really some of my favorites are Ben's satirical musicals, ranging from Anthony Weiner, the musical, to a musical on O.J. Simpson. And in addition to that, I'd also suggest that you consider following Ben on Twitter. And what you will read from Ben, if you follow Ben on Twitter, is a daily, actually hourly, incredibly funny and intelligent commentary on what's happening in the world. And when I say the range, it really ranges the entire gamut. A typical Ben tweet could range from a comment on what John Kerry is doing overseas to what Putin may be doing or not doing, to questioning why the Dolphins head coach called the idiotic timeout. And it's kind of remarkable that someone would have that range of depth and knowledge to be able to so effectively, humorously, satirically comment on so many different areas. I believe that if Twitter had existed at the time that Jonathan Swift and Mark Twain lived, the types and quality of tweets that you read, which you would read from the two of them if they were around now, is what you can read from Ben today. I think he's a truly remarkable, gifted author, and I can see why George Clinton and Questlove decided to work with him in going forward with their books. Please join me in welcoming Ben home to the Miami Book Fair.
Hello, Miami. I'm Ben Greenman, as Bob just told you. I'm a novelist and a journalist, but more importantly today, a collaborator and a moderator. You got lucky, all of the people here in this room, because you're privileged to get to spend time with musical icons of two different generations at least. George Clinton, who will be out in a minute, is the uncut brain behind Uncut Funk. He founded Funkadelic in the late 60s, dominated the music world with Parliament in the 70s, and worked tirelessly both before and after that, bringing funk to the masses and also the asses. Questlove is a founding member of the thoughtful, prolific, and drum-tight hip-hop group The Roots, and you can also see him every night and his other guys as musical director for The Tonight Show. Oh, and both are authors, which is why you're seeing them here today. Questlove wrote a memoir, Mo Meta Blues, which came out last year and is coming out in paperback fairly soon. And George just published his memoir, which is called Brothas Be Yo Like George, Ain't That Funkin' Kinda Hard on You? So please welcome both men. I will go sit and they will come out.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, nice crowd.
All right, here they are, so we're going to start. I'm going to ask a couple general... Oh, by the way, I want to tell the two panelists to talk into the mic. If anybody when in the back can't hear them, just wave your hands and then they'll talk louder. And I'll talk to them for a while. Think of questions for the audience Q&A, and hopefully we'll have some time for that. But you'll get great stories, so we'll have some time. All right. I want to start with a couple general questions and then get more specific. Start with George, then ask Questlove. What made you want to write a book at the time that you wrote a book after years making other creative products? What's the reason for the book?
I'm going to say the same thing I've been saying on this tour. The short answer is look on page 379 on. Because that's the story. That's the reason I wrote the book now. Because I don't feel like I'm finished. I wouldn't have written the book.
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
the end.
Yeah, it's all of the endings.
Someone asked me if you would do a sequel, and I said, sure. And in 70 more years, let's do it.
Oh, we can do a sequel tomorrow.
All right.
Each one of those stories are 3 times as long as we told them.
And so, why did Questlove? Why did you decide to write Mo Meta when you did it?
I didn't want to write this book. And if you remember, you had to chase me down like a mob figure or collected his money. I don't know. I just felt, I think that when you're still into the work, in general, I think black people by nature have a hard time looking back. And I didn't necessarily feel like my journey was over or was even that interesting.
Well, it's not over. You're young. I mean, that's the thing. It's at absolute worst half over. So, right. And we'll talk about that a little later, how we put the book together, given that you're still very young.
The genesis of it was basically this website that I started called OK Player, which is like the Roots website. Me and rapper, who wrote Jesus Walks? Rhymefest. Rhymefest and I were having a sort of kind of Larry David self-mocking debauchery. Who has the worst celeb stories of all time? Like who has those womp womp moments with celebrities? And I swore that I was the guy that always got the pie in the face, you know, with every celebrity encounter. And he and I were just going toe for toe, note for note on my website. And by the time I got to the 200th story, I guess the Village Voice had printed all of my stories out, and people came running and said, you need to write a book.
Now, in both cases, the books were actually much more than just the stories of the people that you knew or worked with, though there's a lot of stories in both. And I want to ask really briefly about the titles before we get to more specific questions. They're both pretty unorthodox titles, although now, compared to George's, yours seems pretty normal. But I want
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I gave you camouflage. So talk about the title a little bit. Why that title?
I had to make it interesting if I'm going to write a book and say what I wanted to say on 379. I had to at least say that. But I didn't only say it, I sang it. That's actually one of the songs on the new album. It's called Brothers Be Your Like George. Ain't that funkin' kind of hard on you? Remember, we had a hard time convincing the publishers to put that many words in there, but I've always written whole stories as the title, like Standing on the Verge of Getting It On. That's a lot of words for a title. Super groovalistic prosophistication.
I think we said in the book, we went and checked, and it's the longest song other than maybe, it was, what's the Isaac Hayes?
Psycho or
The Isaac Hayes one is,
Right.
I think, the same number of letters, and it's longer than Supercalifragilistic, I believe. So, yeah, the publisher didn't want to do it. They wanted something generic like Mothership Connection or the George Clinton story. But really, the theme is how you keep doing it. I mean, that's part of what the book's about.
Yeah, how do you keep reinventing yourself? And we had this conversation before, and that was by paying attention to teeny boppers. You know, that was always my way of looking to see what's going to happen next. The one that's going to chase you out of there, that's going to make you feel like you're old, those are the ones you need to be paying attention to, because you are old if they get on your nerve. They're supposed to get on your nerve. That's their job, to get on your nerve. They bring new blood. They bring new everything. And by that time, you should be done, say, shot your wad and get out of there. But I refuse to leave. I feel like I'm still just as young as they are, and I can jam now.
For Mo Meta Blues, I have a quick question for that, and then go to the other questions. What % of people get it confused with Mo Better Blues still?
everyone, even Spike Lee himself. But yeah, it was Mo Meta Blues simply because, you know, I'm world famous for telling stories within a story, within a story, within a story. It's kind of like when you have 4 mirrors surrounding you, you just see infinity. Like everything's a reference to something that's a reference to something. And I mean, it's to the point where I insisted that another voice come and add perspective to it.
Right, in the book, if people haven't read it, there's other characters, Amir's manager and me and the publisher, talking about his story. So there is that level of meta-ness maintained. Now, speaking of meta, so when I started to write up questions for the event today, I wrote them all up, and then I realized that I could just switch them. I could give Questlove's questions to George and George's questions to Questlove. So that's what I'm going to do, and we'll see how it works. And if it's a horrible disaster, you all can leave, and you come back tomorrow, and we'll do it over again.
So you want to know what it was like writing Flashlight? Okay.
No, they're not specific. Anything that specific, I took out. So this is originally for Questlove. This is for George. So how did you feel when you first heard early hip-hop, particularly Rakim and Public Enemy?
Oh, shit. I tell you, when I first heard Rakim, I threw something at the radio. I thought, you feel like you're doing it all your life. I did this, I'm down, I'm bad. Then you hear somebody come along and make you feel like you ain't did shit. And when I heard Follow the Leader, I don't think I stopped listening to it till I knew every word.
And you've incorporated it into your...
From then on, I tried to see if I could write anything rhyming that long and make sense that long. No, you can't. He owned that. When I heard Rakim do that, when I heard Public Enemy Bring On the Noise, it's the same thing we had when we did Free Your Mind, Your Ass Will Follow. We was trying to bring on the noise because we knew that's what people wanted to hear. They want to hear that tear the roof off. They want you to blow up. Everything is related to it like that. When I heard them, I said, this is it again. I had to start off. And then you hear Eminem. Every time I hear somebody new like that, I feel like I haven't done nothing. It's a good feeling because I'm inspired to try to do something else.
All right, see, that went well with George answering Questlove's question. So I'm going to try it again. This is a question I wrote for George that I'm going to ask to Questlove. Talk about the importance of doo-wop and vocal groups early in your life.
Nah, seriously. One of the best ruse acts of musical history was my parents convincing me that doo-wop was contemporary music. My father was an artist who was on Chess Records back in the 50s, a doo-wop artist named Lee Andrews. So by the time I was born, there was a revival in the oldie circuit. So pretty much I grew up backstage at those, like, I mean, you see nostalgia shows now, which is, I guess, like people celebrating the 90s. Or down here in Miami, you see those, like, freestyle shows with, like, 19 acts, Stevie B and all those cats. Like, that's the environment I grew up with oldies. So, I remember seeing Jackie Wilson before his coma, or my memory of Chuck Berry was him saying, "I ain't signed no fucking autograph."
I think that's everybody's memory of Chuck Berry.
Yeah, like, that's everyone's Chuck Berry story. But pretty much I grew up in oldies doo-wop culture, and my father really took me to school. Like, I guess at the age of 5, I was a human GPS. I could navigate the maps and get him to the clubs. At the age of 5, I knew interstates and that sort of thing, going to the gigs. And then by the age of 6, I knew how to do monitors and set up microphones in the nightclub. Like, a 6-year-old was allowed to go in the nightclub and set this up. By the time I was 8, I was running the lights. Again, 8-year-old cutting gels and getting a ladder and knowing that black people don't look good in green and, all this stuff. And then I was doing wardrobe by 9, and then my father's drummer had a broken arm one day, and he just shrugged like, "Okay, well, you know the show, so you drum." And then I became his band leader at 10. So I was immersed. My first gig was at Radio City Music Hall, and then my last gig was at Madison Square Garden when I was like 23. And then, yeah.
Can I say something? His father was one of my idols, Leandro and the Hearts, back in
I love the fact that you
58.
acknowledged him in the book. I love that.
It's so here's another question that I wrote for Questlove that I'm going to ask George. Your band, The Roots, but really it's your band, Parliament, Funkadelic, Horny Horns, Parlet, Brides of Funkenstein. Who am I leaving out? P-Funk All-Stars, all of them. Your band is renowned for putting ideas into your music. Not just making music, but making music with ideas, concepts, things about society. How do you do that in a way so that people don't think that you're lecturing to them when you put ideas into your work?
Say something stupid. Say something like Promenter Shit, Backwash, Psychosis, Enema Squad, the Doo-Doo Chasers, the band in the tidy bowl of your mind, bringing you music to get your shit together by. It's all about psychological, health, but I'm saying it in a stupid way that, what is he talking about? But once it sink in, okay, like free your mind, your ass will follow. It made sense to me later. I don't know what the hell I was saying when I said it.
And you told me that at Woodstock 99, there was a performer before you, and they tried to hand you the microphone to make a sort of straightforward political statement, and you balked at that because you didn't want to come out and do it straight like that.
You do not play with that microphone on the stage with that many people at your fingertips. I never wanted to preach or be responsible for that getting out of hand. That could easily get out of hand. And if somebody get up there just preaching off emotions, that's very dangerous. So I'm trying to make our show, since I know people looked at us like that, I always used to say, this ain't nothing but a party. I get paid for this. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to be him, because I'm 25 feet up in the air on the ladder at a spaceship. I'm high as hell, and this box is only so wide, I could easily fall, and I deserve to fall if I think I'm him.
There's a great story in the book when one of the albums was adopted by 5% Nation of Islam as part of the philosophy, and George would play, and they would start showing up in the front row, and George would see them and think, this is out of hand. I'm nobody's prophet. I'm not doing political theory.
I just realized, because I hadn't thought of it, I realized for my kids who was, Muslims, that was part of the nation's, the mothership was part of their teaching. And I didn't realize it till I saw all the bow ties in the front row saying, give up the knowledge, brother. And I'm like, oh, shit.
So,
I don't want to transgress it. I don't want to be, but I do understand where it's that I have gotten it from someplace now, because I do remember the story in the back of my head, but I didn't do it from that point of view. So I was really scared when I saw that I may be transgressing right here.
right, exactly. And okay, this is the question I wrote for George that I'm going to ask Questlove. You were on Casablanca Records in the 70s, George.
Yes, I was.
And Neil Bogart, who started Casablanca, sort of dominated many, many different areas of music. He had come from being a bubblegum producer, and he took the world by storm with funk, with P-Funk, with Parliament, disco with Donna Summer, and sort of cartoonish heavy metal with Kiss. George, fake George, do you have any stories about Kiss?
Yes, I do have a story about Kiss. We were doing a residency in Buffalo, New York, the summer of 1978 or 79, so maybe I was 7 years old. My parents were very restrictive on my television watching, but they were always cool with me watching anything musical. Now, in the 70s, whereas now music is rather ubiquitous. You can go on YouTube and watch many a documentary of music or a show or video, whatever you want. During my period, most of these shows would come on after midnight. So even though I had to go to bed at 8:30, I was allowed to wake up at 12:30 to watch either like Midnight Special would come on after the Tonight Show, or rock concert, or even Soul Train came on at 1 in the morning. So I was allowed to wake up and watch these shows and then go back to bed. So I'm watching Don Kirshner's rock concert, and it's over, and it's 2 in the morning, and I'm thirsty, and so I get up out of my bed in the hotel room and 50 cents and get a soda. Now, the way the hotel is designed, it's in a circle. I get the soda, and then you hear ding, like elevators are opening, department store, ding, and damn if it's not Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Ace, and Peter Criss, like fresh from an after party or whatever, but they were the living manifestation nightmare of what I always, because my sister was slightly older, so she saw Kiss Meets the Phantom and had those album covers and Destroyer and Kiss Comes On. So it was something out of Family Guy. Like basically I ran, but because the hotel was in a circle and I ran so fast, I ran by them like 3 times. Like they were right here. But the next night, my dad, took me downstairs to meet them without their makeup on, and they turned out to be pretty cool.
So here's a question for George that was originally for Questlove. All right. You've worked closely over the course of your career, off and on, with a reclusive and some would say troubled musical genius, D'Angelo, but it's not really D'Angelo in your case, it's Sly Stone. And so I wanted to ask you, with Sly, you've been through decades of this, and you've seen various artists fall by the wayside, either been overtaken by personal demons, stop making work. It's a 2-part question. What happens to people when they get locked up and they stop making work, and how have you avoided that?
The same thing that I said before, the enthusiasm of fighting for my rights for these songs reignited my whole ambition to be a star again. I know I had to be popular in order to fight this fight. I couldn't be old and forgotten about or a crackhead or none of that. It had to be brand new again. I found a way to reinvent myself according to whatever the problems I'm having. Now with Sly, he's a genius. He's still a genius musically.
And he's on the new record of yours.
He's all over the new record. People are going to hear how good he can still write and play. He's that person. But
Really?
Oh yes,
All the puns are back and
all of that. He's got that's he can do that off the top of his head. His problem is he can't take people telling him you better do something. You can get him to mess him completely up just by telling him you better, because he ain't gonna do it. Then you can be sure of that. And he don't know. You tell him that he said I try. He called me those little ones, because I avoid that letting people make me that mad that I hurt myself. Most people just give up because they think of their age that they ain't got a shot at getting in the game on the radio and all of that. Mine is you have to make a new way the same way you did when you first started.
Well, you talk in the book about how if you were backstage and someone would say to Sly, you have to go on.
He's not going.
And if somebody tells you to be somewhere on time, you show up.
Oh, I'm going if it ain't but three of us.
Yep.
Because the people don't have anything to do with your problem. Whether you're getting paid or not, that should have been taken care of before you got there.
You mean the audience?
The audience have nothing to do with it. They deserve their show. So if we didn't get our business taken care of before we got there, they shouldn't have to suffer for that. You know, and that's the way I've always felt about that. You know, and sometimes people will play me. You know, I have to be careful because they know that I'm going to play anyway. They'll try that one. So I have to really be careful with my people that manage me not to let my feelings get in front of their negotiation. Because some people will use that.
Here's a question for Questlove, originally for George. You've been doing this for decades, since 1958. But actually, it's since high school in 1958, but it's really high school in 1988. What's the single biggest change in the music industry that you've noticed since you started?
I would say social media culture. And I actually wonder if we would have made it in social media culture, because our version of going viral was literally bringing it to the people. You know, the idea of the roots as you know it. I mean, we started in high school. I went to high school with Boys to Men back in Philadelphia, at Performing Arts High School. But, you know, that was just for, like, talent shows and getting girls' phone numbers and that sort of thing. But when we took it seriously, the idea of busking culture just hit New York City. So back when I would take the train in New York to audition for the new school or for Juilliard, you go on the streets and see these kids hitting buckets, busking for change and that sort of thing. And I think there was a bucket drummer named Chocolate who was in a Mariah Carey video, the Someday video. He was also in a Spike Lee Levi's commercial, so he was getting like a lot of play on television. And a girl had mistaken me for him on a train once. Was like, "Oh, you're the guy from the Mariah Carey video," and I was like, "No, that's not me." But then, like 3 hours later, it hit both me and Tariq like, "Bing!" Like, why don't we do that? Like, why don't we steal all the pots and pans from our mom's kitchens and then go on South Street and just start seeing what happens? And, you know, initially we just wanted to do it again to get girls' phone numbers and get a turkey sandwich at Wawa and some movie money. And then we wound up getting a career. But that's how it happened. Like, we literally would just play on the streets for 5 hours every Saturday. And then that would lead to a poetry slam. Then that would lead to a coffee shop. And then suddenly, you know, club owners are opening their doors to us that for people that they would kind of say to us like, "Oh, yeah, you know, I don't like hip hop, but I like you guys." So that's kind of a blessing and a curse because, you know, we want to be included, but then again, we were kind of ostracized because we weren't of that, or at least in the eyes of the people, like, well, you guys are a little above what rap music is. So it's kind of a weird fork in the road to be in. But that's pretty much, like, we didn't have social media. Like, the idea of us tweeting out, "This is where we'll be next week," like, we didn't have that. So
It's interesting. I have another question for George / Questlove in a second. But when you talked about club owners saying to you, "We don't like hip hop, but we like you," George, you say in the book that there was a period where you were too white for black critics, too black for white critics, sort of hanging in the middle because you were doing this thing that brought in all these influences. And so you have to just make it work then. You have to just do your thing then.
Right, because the people that stuck with us, either black or white, grew slowly, but they kept growing. We didn't lose fans. They didn't grow old and disappear. Most of the fans that stuck with us, they stick with you the same way they do with the Grateful Dead or any of those kind of bands that grow older, their kids and their kids' kids like you. But it takes a long time because we were too loud for R&B, black radio, and too rock and roll, and then we were black, so that you wasn't right for the white radio. But we knew that, and the more that took place, the better we liked it, because the fans that did show up was fanatical about us, black and white.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so for Funkadelic shows, and especially pre-76 Funkadelic shows, when you guys are really doing like rock shows better than like how easy was that to sell any of the artists? Like what was a typical Funkadelic show in say 73 for a white audience? Or
Depending on where we played. Now, if we played at the Apollo, we knew we had to turn the amps down. We knew we had to play Testify or Knock on Wood, some R&B thing. We knew how to perform. If Jackie Wilson was headliner, we knew not to chase his fans.
wait, Funkadelic opened for Jackie Wilson?
Oh, yeah. Jerry Butler.
Pre-coma, though.
Wow, that's amazing.
Oh, we've been around a long time.
It's this is a question for George that I wrote for Questlove. So in the genre of music that you practice, performers and artists take on second identities. No, people don't use their birth name. They create characters or persona to let their music go out into the world so that it's connected to them and connected to audiences in a different way. Talk a little bit about the importance of creating characters in your music.
Oh, okay. I thought that was Questlove.
No, it was for Questlove, but hip-hop artists do it too. And in a way, you pioneered this, sort of creating a character that wasn't exactly you. Soul artists played as themselves. You were Sam Cooke, or you were Little Richard, or you were Otis Redding.
Right.
P-Funk comes along, and what do you create?
We did Sir Nose, Dr. Funkenstein, Mr. Wiggles, Star Child, and all those characters, because I had noticed that Mickey Mouse showed up in every generation. He was a new character for no matter what years. When I was 10 years old in the 50s, he was there. 70s, he was still there. 90s. So I realized that early that characters didn't get old and die. Only people got old and get played out and be up there still fronting, trying to be sexy to the young girls. You need to be off the stage by then.
There's an anecdote that you tell pretty early in your career, probably 68, 69, when you're walking to a show and you hear a woman outside say, two guitarists and an old fool?
There's a guitar, a drummer, and an old fool. And we were but 22 at that time.
So and then that same tradition gets taken up. You can see in hip hop in a lot of ways by people like Snoop Dogg, who create it's a persona separate from them. It's them, but it's not quite them, and they can be cartoons.
You could be a dog forever.
Now here's a question for Questlove that I originally wrote for George. Tell me about this story in Oklahoma City when you were performing a show and a woman comes to the show, she's in the back, she goes straight up the aisle, gets onto the stage, and blows smoke rings out of her ass. Tell me about that, Questlove.
Okay, so
If you
it was October.
If you wanted to,
No, you gotta. You have to tell this story because
it's a pretty incredible moment in rock and roll history.
Okay, let me put it like this. Mothership is out. It's a smash. We going to Oklahoma City, in Norman, Oklahoma. We're on the stage getting ready to start the show. We done played a couple of songs. Now we're playing the song called The Girl Is Bad. Bad. The girl
Disco
is
Kid,
bad.
yeah.
We're just grooving, and you look down the aisle. Here come a girl. You could tell from the back of her she's going to do something. You don't know what she's going to do, but the way she walked down the aisle, smoking a joint, and she walked right up. The stage was a little lower than this, because she stepped right up on the stage. Hit her overalls. She had overalls, one button and the other one hanging loose. She hit it. Looked like she had bricks in her pocket, because when she hit the button, the pants hit the floor. Bam! She's standing there, nappy dugout and all, looking right there. She turned around. She got the pants around her ankle, so she can't move too. She had to move around. She had to scoot around because the pants around her ankle. Turned around, looked over her shoulder, took the joint, stuck it up her ass. Swear to God, three smoke rings. If anybody remember Ballantine beer, you know the 3 rings that, like the Olympics. 3 smoke rings. How the people are clapping now, that's how the show ended. That right. We tried for half an hour to do another song. All you got was everybody. Every time we opened our mouth, people started laughing. We never got to do the show.
And that's exactly how it happened for me.
Now I'm going to do the third act of the Q&A, which is quick questions for them, one then the other, not the switcheroo questions. And then start thinking of questions, because after this part is over, if you guys have questions, you can ask either man your questions. All right, so let's go first to Questlove, then to George. If you weren't a musician, what would you be doing?
Oh, man, come on. Okay, I would have a job. No, because, all right, I've been doing a lot of Chris Rock Top 5 promotion this weekend. You know, Chris Rock likes to say that both he and I are cut from the same cloth, whereas everyone in our industry says, well, you know, if I wasn't in the rap game, I'd be knee-deep in the crack game. But the thing is, Chris and I had hardcore disciplinarian fathers that didn't play that. So as a result, like, you had to get a job. So I would say that my dad really wanted me to do some sort of computer programming. I would probably be a teacher, which I guess, well, I kind of am. So
Kind of am. You teach a course.
Yeah,
you go to
so-
New York, take his course. What would you? Now you've been doing this since you were a kid. Can you even imagine what the alternative would have been?
I'm scared to think about it. I just might be a crackhead.
So are you saying if you weren't in the rap game, you'd be in the crack game?
Well, wait. I don't think people know his genesis of what he was before he became.
Well, I was a beautician. I did hair, but when you got your hair like that, that ruined my business. James Brown said, "You ain't what?" And then she cut your process off or something.
How you gonna give respect if you
ain't
haven't cut your process yet?
Yeah, I mean
Exactly.
that ruined my business. I'd have been a crackhead.
That killed your business.
That killed my business. I was out of it already, but that would have killed it had I been still in it.
But in Jersey, you were doing Dionne Warwick's hair, and that everyone.
But that was a little earlier.
Oh, okay.
You know, not Dionne Warwick, Patti LaBelle.
Patti LaBelle. Okay.
Dionne gonna get you for that. we played baseball together.
Oh, okay.
Her mother rather.
So you would have been either in the crack game or you would have been in the hair game, but then Amir would have ruined it for you.
I probably would have found something. I'm like his father. My father didn't play that either.
Right, he had you working
I was
as a
a
kid.
bum. I was a bum at drugs. I mean, I didn't do good at all in that. You know, my stories are deeper than I was. I was a punk.
Yeah, there's a story where you say when you were a kid, if your friends, you said you punked out at the worst level when people would go. So when they were going to rob a store,
I'm not gonna be here when my father get here. If y'all robbing the store, I'm gone. My father would kick your ass, and he'd tell the police if they showed up, you gonna shoot him if I don't whip him.
Right.
You
Now-
know, and that's the way that was.
okay, here's the next lightning round question. What's an album that you love that would surprise people, or an artist that you love that would surprise people? In the book, you mention your.
Well, there was a period where I had to really suppress my love for Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. But, I mean, I was raised by 3 very distinct record collectors. A yacht rock enthusiast and my dad. My mother was very out and kind of eccentric with her jazz choices, and then my sister, at the time, to sort of blend in with her friends, was very much into what was on AM radio at the time. But my dad was big on Carole King, Johnny Mathis. Like, he liked vocalist, the yacht rock of his day. But yeah, like I thought, like, I didn't have the image of the Beach Boys that most people have. Like, oh, just whatever, dumb surfing music. No, like their harmonies were like out of this world. So I've always loved Pet Sounds.
And you said you had to hide it early in hip hop, like a
from
porn
Jay Dilla.
stash. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was like my porn stash hiding. Like, you didn't let cats on my block know that you was listening to to Pet Sounds.
How about you? What's an act? Now, if people really know Funkadelic, they probably know this, but like the British hard rockers, like,
Well, Cream and all of them, but Beatles, like everybody else. Sergeant Pepper, to this day, every couple of months, I will watch that movie, because that bulk erase anything you think you know about music. Those songs the Beatles did are like that. Anybody can sing them and make them soulful, make them pop. You can do anything with their song. They were real songwriters. So I'm really into Yellow Submarine. I watch that all the time.
and have you covered She Loves You on Electric Spanking for
Yeah,
like
why is it
10
only like
seconds?
57 seconds? Where's the full version of it?
Amir wants the whole version of. Was there a whole She Loves You that got faded
It's
out?
only like 30 seconds.
No, we were clowning. That was, I think, Roger, Slide, and myself. We have full versions of a lot of those songs, though.
I gotta hear that.
So later you can send him the full version
Yeah.
of She Loves You. All right. So here's another question: If
I
you
Want You Heard, I Want You.
that you've done,
Oh, yeah, She's
You're-
So Heavy,
She's
yeah.
So Heavy.
Ed
Yeah.
Hazel.
It's all right. So if you were let's say you were a million years from now, when you pass away, you were buried, and you could only be buried with one of your records, which one would you pick? You don't have to be, but
Oh, you mean from my catalog or from my collection?
No, of records you've made, of records that you've been on as an artist. Is there one that you have special fondness for, or that keeps resurfacing in weird ways?
You know, I always say that asking like your favorite song is also asking what's your favorite breath you ever took. However, you know, our last album, and then You Shoot Your Cousin, is special to me because I sort of knew that was our longtime collaborator and producer, my manager for almost 20 years, Richard, passed away. If you guys read the Momenta Blues, he's the one that's adding the comments at the bottom. So, I mean, he was our Peter Grant, our Brian Epstein, our George Martin. So when he passed away earlier this year, I kind of knew that album was sort of his swan song, I guess in a way his goodbye letter to us. Even though it was like our record, I probably more than any Roots album since The Tipping Point that I kind of just let him have 100% control of it, the direction of it, even the title. What should we call it? And Then You Shoot Your Cousin. Oh, okay. All right, okay. But yeah, I always see it as his, everything said in it, like that's his, I think it was his goodbye letter to us, so that means it's more sentimental for me than anything.
So George, you've done, I don't even do the count before I came out here. I'd like to count so I don't get it wrong, but let's say 10,000 records. It's less than that, but it's not that much less. If you had to just pick one album, and I know that's a crazy exercise, is there one that keeps coming back to you?
People have been asking me that lately a lot, and I never really thought about it like he said. But I guess if I had to do that, pick a record just while I'm alive, because if I'm dead, I don't really care. But it would be a hard choice between One Nation and Knee Deep.
So 78, 79 is that's
Yeah, I think we were at our peak, and I think One Nation was like the epitome of where we were at, and Knee Deep was left over from that from that album. Those two, in weird enough, those are the two that I'm fighting for right now in the courts. Those are the only two that I own right now, and my own lawyer is trying to take them from me. So that makes this whole thing very special, because those are the two records that I own and that I favor the most.
And I'll ask you that. If you could pick one of George's records, do you have one that you would pick that's especially close to you?
Absolutely. Probably my favorite P-Funk associated album would be Let's Take It to the Stage. It was one of the first albums that I was introduced to in my mom's collection. And, you know, with most Funkadelic albums, you get lost in it because the imagery and the cartoons that, you know, each album was that's the beauty of having wax in your hands and reading. You get so lost and you're immersed in this whole cartoonish world where you just discover things all the time. But even musically, like it drew me in. And, I mean, it came out when I was 4, but I felt like I understood it. So.
And the Roots actually are one of the rare modern, not just hip hop groups, but contemporary groups at all, who put a lot of energy into the album art in the same way. And you've had, whether it's the beard and collage or the line drawings, and in a way you're making albums for a vinyl era, even though they're not vinyl anymore, you know.
I think at the end of the day, I'm creating records, be it popular or not. Like, when you look at my canon, when everything is over and you look at the Roots canon, I want those 16 records to feel at home with the other 75,000 records that I have in my collection. Like, I make records that 5-year-old me would like.
One thing, and then I have a question for George about, it's about a pig, so you know the story, so you can start thinking of it. But when
I knew you were going to ask them the pig question.
When we did your book, one of the things you said that was amazing is that when you were a little kid, you would draw and write the Rolling Stone reviews. Imagine, not even a little kid, when you started with the group, you would imagine the review in the magazine, and that let you imagine the cover and imagine the illustration.
I'm doing that right now, like, and it's scarier now because I don't have Rich to sit in the driver's seat. So, I mean, Tariq and I talked about this. Like, we're now we were the Griswolds in the back seat of the family vacation car, while Rich took care of it. You know, took care of everything, all of our bickering and all of our tug of warring. But Tariq and I now know that of our entire history, our 17th record's probably the most important record of our career, because he and I have to finally be adults and create this on our own. So in my head, yes, the first process before any Roots record is I write the review. The songs aren't even written yet. We have a lot of the music.
But you go to the end and imagine how it's going to be.
I would normally do the Rolling Stone review and imagine a glowing review. Now I do Pitchfork, but yeah.
Do you know how pissed Rich would be that you compared him to Clark Griswold? So
Yeah.
this is for George, and then if people have questions, if not, I can keep going until 5 a.m. tomorrow. But I wanted to ask George, so you have these two groups, Funkadelic and Parliament, that sort of trade albums all through the 70s. You release many on the same day, but before that, there's another version of Parliament, which is the Parliaments, which is a vocal group. And before that, there's another, briefly, a group called, there's an Osmium record, and you work with this guy, Jeffrey Bowen, who's a Motown producer, and he gets you a special present, and you take that special present to England. This is one of the great stories in the book. Do you want to just tell what this present was?
It was a little pig, little baby pig. I wanted to get a skunk at first, and everybody said, no, that's too funky, okay? So Jeffrey bought me a pig. They had just finished weaning it, you know, he was off his mother's tit. And we named it Officer Dibbles. I don't know if anybody remembers the cartoon Top Cat. It was Officer Dibbles. But Officer Dibbles, he was so smart. We didn't realize that he'd pick up things really quick. He would answer the phone ring, he'd knock it over, and snort in it, Kids would take him to school and show and tell, you know, because he would curtsy for you, had a little diamond necklace around his neck. And he was a little smart pig, so we took him to England. He was so smart on the plane, you know, they used to make you check your animals, but he was so cute at the counter, everybody was like, let him come on, let him come on. We had him on the plane, running up and down the aisles. My only thing was don't feed him, because we fed him very little. We kept him like that. So when I finally went on the road, you know, later on, they fed him and got him big, like a big hog, and I don't even want to feed him.
What happened to the pig afterwards?
They ate him. I wasn't around.
Pig diabetes.
I
and
wasn't
then
around,
gone.
but he over in England, he was such a ham, you know. Not,
Put it on.
but we were supposed to play at the Albert Hall, and Frank Zappa had been there, and they tore the place up, so they barred us from playing there. So we figured we'd do something to, you know, call him on it. We rented a donkey, took him up to Royal Albert statue, and was going to take a picture, you know, an ass. That's what we call an Albert, you know, an ass. But the donkey got right up to the statue and took a shit right on the steps. So everybody's laughing and kiki, and Dibbles, like I say, he's a ham, right in the middle, he's looking over, everybody's laughing. He runs right in the middle of the Melody Maker, New Music Express, all the cameras there, squat down and did the same thing. Skeet, he could not stand nobody getting, you know, play but him. He was a ham.
And there's a picture of you guys on the steps of Royal Albert Monument, and the donkey's there. And I think in the corner you can see the pig. He's very little and it's grainy, but he's in there. So now we have a couple audience questions. So go ahead, sir.
My name is David Blake. I am a Funketeer fan. Always. I want to testify to the present. But one of the things that I was going to ask you, Mr. Clinton, was describe the impact of Chocolate City to the black community when you actually put out that album.
Whoa, boy. Our whole career flipped. You know, I knew we were on to something because James Brown had did Black and I'm Proud. Black was popular at the time. It was hip to wear the pick you got in it was cool. So, and I heard somebody on the radio say there was 80% black in Washington, D.C. That was my cue. So when I did the album, you know, Ali in the White House, Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder, it took off so fast. We wasn't used to AM radio. All our records up until then had been underground, you know, FM radio before FM was the thing. This record came out and went straight on AM, and we didn't know what to do. We was running around there trying to find out what was we gonna wear, because we used to didn't care what we wear. We wore diapers and sheets and anything. But when that became a hit, and we were with Neil Bogart, we knew it was time to make a change. The community went completely crazy. Not only the black community, because on the record, remember we said the vanilla suburbs. Everybody went crazy because Neil was like that with Casablanca. They didn't have a black department or a white department. Everybody worked the record together, both the black and the white department. There was Cecil Holmes, you know, Ruben Rodriguez, all of them, Gerald Busby, all of them came out from Neil. It was a family at that place, so the community that we played to at that time when that record came out was the entire country. And Mothership just evened it off.
And then Funkin, which is right there. You can hold up the record if you want. Just hold so everyone can see it. So that next question, sir, at the microphone.
All right. So I have another question for George, but I'm sorry, Questlove. So if you want to answer it, you can answer it too.
It's not
And
even
pretend
about
you
me.
know.
Go ahead.
All right. So back in 2003, I don't remember if you remember when you played with Fish with your band. So I was wondering if, in Miami.
Right down the street, yes.
I was wondering if you remember, if you could tell us about if you guys practiced or if you just
No,
went on stage together.
That's one good thing about jam bands. You just jam.
Yeah.
You get up there and cut loose. And we did that night. We played with them right down the street. And then we left their show, and they came with us and played with us that same night. That was New Year's Eve.
Where'd you guys play after?
I don't know where that place was. They done changed this place around so much around here. I don't know where I'm at no more.
Cool.
I used to live all around here.
I gotta say that Fish, I have a lot of Fish stories, but they were very instrumental in kind of offering us a roadmap to what our future was. Because for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how a band without any hits, like I sell more records than Fish does, and we're like not a across the board commercial hip hop group. And I was trying to figure out like how are these guys selling out Madison Square Garden 4 nights in a row with no hit single, with no hit album. And just from a scientific level, like we hit up their management, and during that last week of them being a band, you remember the first retirement, they let us just trail them and study them. So like the first few nights, my management and I we were amazed at what we saw. Like I wasn't even there from the angle of like, oh, I'm really a big Fish fan. Like we just walk around the audience and see what connection they had with them, and okay, why are they playing vacuum cleaners during the show, and where are these trampolines coming from, and like all those guys, Trey, they were very generous in sort of providing us with a map on how to survive taking the scenic route. You know, like they're important to history. They don't get enough respect from critics.
The next question, let me see what we're doing on time. We have about, how many people are in the line? Okay, so let's do those. Nobody else stand up. We'll do those and then we'll stop. Sir, what's your question?
Yes, so first off, I want to say a great thank you for such a great talk. If you can give these guys a round of applause. I think it's Bose that has an ad out, a commercial out, talking about why they spend so much money on headphones. And the reason is because of the ability of artists across these genres to impact and move masses and basically the entire world. And so along with that, my question is, why is it that, for example, our brother George was talking about when he wants to say something meaningful in a song, you mix it up with something stupid? So the question is a two-part question. Why is it that, number one, we don't see even the artist that's been around for some time taking it back to the days of Public Enemy, Rakim, Poor Righteous Teachers, to actually say have a music that teaches the people? And number two, what advice would you give to the up-and-coming artists across genres to not just rap about the usual stuff, but rap about something that has some substance?
Before you answer, I just want to ask one thing. Are there people in the house who are running it? I just don't want to run into the next panel. Should this be the last question, or we can go a couple more? Okay, so we'll go a couple more. Okay, perfect. So, sorry about that. Go ahead, answer.
I noticed a sea change, and it happened in 2003, right at the beginning of the war. And I did an interview in which I told a journalist that, well, you know, the best thing in this particular era that we're living in is that usually when times are politically bad, you're going to get a lot of great music in terms of protests. And, you know, I was thinking in terms of Curtis Mayfield and Bob Dylan, and I was expecting a lot of artists to come forward, Rage Against the Machine, and a lot of left to center message artists per se. And then something strange happened, which was Natalie Mines of the Dixie Chicks spoke up against the war and the process that led us to the war and how she didn't like it. And suddenly, just the balloon wilted, and this, you know, diamond act. Suddenly, the Dixie Chicks couldn't get arrested anymore. And then I noticed that a lot of artists were just like tight-lipped. I think that has caused a lot of fear in a lot of artists, because this is the first time when someone speaks up and then they lose their livelihood.
It's very dangerous to do that nowadays.
You were saying in New York, you couldn't do America Eats Its
You
Young
could
now.
not. You could not do an album like America Eats Its Young, which we were able to do in the '60s and early '70s. You could protest the Vietnam War right up to the last days. But after that, I think the mindset is the government will not tolerate any kind of protests, not even in song. It has to be so cute and corny to sneak by. Because if you do it overtly out in open like it need to be said, it could be very dangerous. Like you say, the Dixie Chicks was a good example because they were white and they got it.
Yeah.
So you know what's going to happen to anybody else talking.
Well, actually, that's why Chuck insisted that Flavor Flav be in the group, because he was the spoonful of sugar that helped the medicine go down. I had that Public Enemy record. I really didn't pay attention to it, and then I heard Too Much Posse. I was like, wait, who's this guy who's always talking smack on the record? I like this guy. And then suddenly I realized, oh, I fell for the trick. Like, they used Flavor Flav to attract me and then suddenly beat me in the head with the message. It's not to say that's not out there. There's plenty of acts. You know, right now, I'm very shocked that if you're familiar with the Run the Jewels project, I'd never thought I'd see a project like that with LP and Big Mike. If you get the Run the Jewels 2 album, it's probably the closest to just that hard-hitting hip-hop with substance that I thought would never, ever come.
One thing I just want to add, thank you for the question, is that Amir mentioned before, they'd say, I don't like hip-hop, but I like you guys. Part of what they were saying, and you and Rich have talked about this a lot over time, is that the way you gave messages it was almost too intellectual or too smart. And there's a sense in which...
Yeah, I kind of, even now I'm wrestling with that. You know, like, I'm like, okay, I can't name this album after a book because I'll get beat in the head. We can't, you know, make it too smart because then, like, I think we're the only act in history that's been told you guys think too much, which is borderline insulting to me, you know. And of course, you know, there's no denying that hip hop is knee deep in minstrelsy right now, and it's hard to escape. But it's very important for me not to seem overly earnest about it, because that too can seem boring. But you know, you have to say something, and right now we're just in a kind of this frozen purgatory place where
Making money. That's where
survival
it's
is
at.
important.
That's where it's at right now, is making money. And pretty soon, somebody is going to do it. It goes around in circles. Somebody's going to get the balls, as we say, and come up and say something really scary, because it's going to be scary if they
and
tell
that
the
becomes
truth.
trendy, right?
If it's the truth, it's going to be scary. So somebody's going to do it. It's just we have to be careful when we do it, because you can see it's very dangerous to be on that border we're on right now with St. Louis. I mean, around there. That's dangerous. So any of those kind of conversations, you got to have people receptive to it. You know, people have to want to hear it, and people got to want to put it out there. But too many people are shaky right now, and if it's shaky, it's twice as dangerous. Somebody's gonna be bold enough to come on out and say it with the power of Eminem. It's a hit record at the same time. It's got to be all of that. Got to be a hit record before they know what they're talking about. Once the hit record is there, then you realize what he said. Then it's, oh shit, this is real. Somebody's going, but it take a kid to do that. You get too old, you can't do that. You can do that at 13, 14, 15, 16. But when you get 18 and 19, I always remember I told you, Kent State, they were too old. By the time you got to that age, they will shoot you down your own.
Oh, you mean because they were too much of a threat to the power
Yeah,
structure?
they were the threat. They were in school. They was intellectual. That was dangerous. They had to do it. But the kids could walk up and put a flower in somebody's gun. A 13-year-old kid could just walk up to the soldier and put a flower in the gun, and it's cute. But you can't do that once you 20 years old.
I don't mean to shortchange the people asking questions, but let's go pretty quickly through the last three questions. Sorry about that, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, real quick. My name is Akbar. I'm an avid reader. I noticed your books on the new arrival shelves at this bookstore. It's an African-American bookstore in Palm Beach County. Been there for 20 years. I want to know what is it that I can do to get you guys to come and do a book signing at an African American bookstore in Palm Beach County.
I have a day job that sort of prevents me, so in about 6 hours, I got to report back to 30 Rockefeller Plaza, so.
Give me your name and the card just back here when it's over. We'll talk about it.
All right, thank you.
I don't live that far from here.
Hi, I'm not really from George's generation. I grew up listening to The Roots, and
You're still from it. You just don't know it yet.
I grew up with both my parents are musicians, and I grew up playing the saxophone. But I love how they would always tell stories, and I loved comedy. So I always stayed up late to watch SNL, Tonight Show, and that's how I got into listening to The Roots at like 13 when you guys got on the late night. And I'm only 18, but I'm starting to work on a production company for comedy and a team for comedians. But I wanted to know how you created The Roots, like find the chemistry of who you wanted, and how you created that group that is today.
I mean, initially the nucleus of the Roots, or the Mick and Keith of it all, is going to be me and Black Thought. And I guess from that initial summer of busking in 1992, we found the community, and I'll say that the most important part, and I guess he also has this in his background, is organizing a community. I didn't know it at the time, but the first 2 or 3 Roots records, it took long. It was hard for us to stick the idea of the Roots, sticking to people. And we really didn't catch on to our 4th album, Things Fall Apart. And that's only because we knew what the formula was. And the formula was we had to gather a community and contextualize that community. And by doing so, we started doing jam sessions twice a week. And these people that would attend these jam sessions were everyday people. But just so happens that girl singing right there, she'll be Jill Scott one day. And this pizza delivery guy is Music Soul Child. And, here's Beanie Siegel and Eve before they were Beanie Siegel and Eve. Pretty much the 30 people that would be in my living room from 1996 to 2000, until it got to be too much noise for the neighbors. I mean, 11 of them wound up with record deals, but we had to organize a community so that way, in the world's eyes, our movement could make sense, which is why he built his community. Bootsy's Rubber Band, the Rise of Funkenstein, Funkadelic Parliament, Roger Zapp, all these groups. So you have to build the community first, and that's the important part.
Thank you. So this will be the last question, then I'll say bye to everybody, and we'll do questions, short answers, and let everybody.
Okay. Thanks so much for coming. This is actually a question for Questlove. And I was just asking, today with technology advancing by the day, do you think it's harder for this generation to master an instrument with a bunch of distractions all the time?
Well, okay, the information generation gives you access to a bajillion things that I didn't necessarily have access to. But I'll say with instruments, it really starts with discipline and practice. There's a movie out right now that I highly recommend called Whiplash. I didn't necessarily go down the route where I had to practice until my hands bled, but Whiplash basically demonstrates the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule, which is if you practice something for 10,000 hours, you will become an expert. I'm not saying that your life's going to change overnight, but you will know what you're doing. So I will say that it starts with literally practicing. People ask all the time, well, is there any advice you can give me? And I ask, well, you got to master your craft. And this means 4 to 6 hours every day. It means no computer lurking, no watching TV, no binge watching, no hanging with your friends. You're going to have to put some serious practice hours to it. That's all I can say.
Excellent. Well, okay, so let me just do a couple last plugs and then I'll let you go. So remember, these are the things that you should go and buy if you don't have them. Mo Meta Blues and Then You Shoot Your Cousin, the book and the most recent Roots album. Brothers B.O. like George Ain't That Funkin' Kinda Hard on You, the book, and the album First You Gotta Shake
Can you
the
say
Gate.
that 3 times in a row?
I'm lucky if I said it once correct. I don't think I messed it up yet, but and the record, First You Gotta Shake the Gate, is out next week digitally. So it's a 33-song album, 33 years since the last Funkadelic record. Go get it next week and then in stores the week after. And thank you all very much for coming and give them a big round of
Thank
applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.